Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Quality of Life and Public Safety Committee. Today is Tuesday, December 15, 2020. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us in this meeting, and we have two items on the agenda, which is the Hartford Fire Department's stats and also the Hartford Police Department stats. So we will be broadcasting this on Hartford Public Access Television and also on Hartford Public Access Facebook. This will also be on channel 96 on Comcast and Frontier. So we will start this evening. And oh, by the way, I'd just like to introduce everyone. We have Chief Freeman, and in the background behind Chief Freeman, Chief Barco.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. And we have Councilman Gale, Chief Thody, Councilwoman Rossetti, Chief Medina, Councilman Clark. We have our Corporation Counsel, Natalie Guerrieri. I hope I didn't ruin it. We have Councilman LeBron, Councilwoman Surgeon, and also my Executive Assistant, Ms. Ortiz. So we will start this meeting with Chief Freeman from the Hartford Fire Department. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Councilman, and good evening to all the sirs and madams of the Court of Common Council and to my esteemed colleagues, Chief Thody and Chief Medina. I'm attempting to share my screen. Can everyone see it okay? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I will go through the first portion of the presentation and then I will hand it over to Chief Barco to go over some of our statistics. So first and foremost, your Hartford firefighters, as usual, they have been working around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, providing exceptional service to our cities in regards to COVID-19. And a lot of their work is not just for emergency response, but it's also in partnerships with different community associations and groups, which I'm going to get into here a little later. But we are 9 months in to Hartford firefighters putting themselves on the line as they do every single day as it pertains to emergency response, whether that's a structure fire, a motor vehicle accident, or EMS call. But COVID-19, I'm so proud of how our men and women have stepped up and came through for our citizen and our residents. Particularly on COVID-19, from a personal protective equipment standpoint, we have no procurement needs. That's thanks to the support of the mayor for allowing me to purchase everything that we need as a city, not just from a first responder standpoint, from HFD, HPD, and Public Works, but also for all of our critical employees who continue to come to work and provide services to our residents. Recently, we took possession of 20,000 N95 respirators and 6,000 gowns. That is for, of course, all city employees who may need it in the execution of their duties and responsibilities. And we also just gave today 1,000 N95 masks to all of our Public Works employees. Also, in regards to PPE, not necessarily a piece of personal protective equipment, but a piece of critical equipment nonetheless. Your fire department, particularly the executive office here on the third floor at fire headquarters, as well as our special services unit, has delivered 84 different air purification machines to different city offices within the last 2 weeks. That's Public Works, that's Development Services, that is also Department of Children, Family, Youth Services, as well as City Council Chambers. 84 different air purification machines have been delivered in the last 2 weeks, with everything being cataloged as far as its location, the serial number. We have registered every machine for the warranty that comes along with that purchase. So again, thank you to all of our department heads. Thank you to the mayor and Ms. Montanez, our chief operating officer, for authorizing the purchase of these machines to ensure our workplaces are as sanitized as possible. In regards to quarantine for the fire department, yesterday we had approximately 21 members that were in quarantine protocol. Today that number is down to roughly 12. That's because going through the assessment process that has been established through St. Francis, which is our occupational health and safety provider, those firefighters have been cleared to return to work. due to an exposure that happened in a firehouse. This firehouse is significant because it's 3 different companies. This was Station 11 on Sisson Avenue, which houses Engine 11, Ladder 5, and the Heavy Rescue. That exposure, I just want to highlight, did not come from a work-related exposure. It was due to a family member who tested positive, which came in contact with a member. And that has been the last few positives we had in the fire department, which again is very minuscule if you think about it. We've only had literally a few positives in the last few months, and that has been due to exposure to family members or friends, not because of an exposure from firefighters executing their duties and responsibilities. But great news today is we had a number of firefighters cleared to return back to work. Recently, we had an insurance services rating assessment, also known as ISO. That's our Class 1 designation. That assessment happened back in September. And that is important because if we would have lost our Class 1 designation, our insurance premiums would have went up in the city by 19%. We were the first department in all of New England to earn a Class 1 designation back on February 1st, 1991. And your Hartford firefighters, through this assessment, has improved upon the last assessment we had, which is done back in 2015 when we scored a 92 cumulative score. This time we had a 95. In order to have a Class 1 designation, you have to score at least a 90. And now your fire department continues to be in a category all on its own, with less than 1% of the 26,000 fire departments in the United States are Class 1 and internationally accredited. So again, your firefighters did a tremendous job, even in the midst of a pandemic, by successfully going through and navigating through that assessment that was conducted by ISO by retaining our Class 1 designation. The winter storm, as all of you are aware, we have a pretty significant storm that's going to be upon us within the next 24 hours. I just want to give you a breakdown of where we're at today from my emergency management director hat. I had several conversations with community partners and other department agencies, participated in the Public Works snow meeting this afternoon. And Eversource, just to make you all aware, they have brought in a number of crews from Canada to assist with power outages. These crews will be strategically deployed throughout the state, including here in Hartford. So we will have crews from Eversource here in the city in the event of power outages. We anticipate approximately 18 hours of snowfall, and that's going to be about 1 to 2 inches an hour starting tomorrow night at around 8 p.m. is when we should expect to start seeing snow. Public Works, they have 2 brine trucks that has been in operation today, dropping product to help warm up the streets. Now, after they're done with the brining process, they will drop salt on our roads in preparation for the storm tomorrow. But they have dropped brine, and this is the first time that we've actually had our own brine trucks. And the brine trucks is what you would typically see on our interstates that our state operates. They've always had brine trucks. We haven't had it up until now, thanks to Director Looney and Public Works and his team for getting us our own brine trucks to ensure that we're treating our roads as efficiently as possible. So 2 brine trucks in operation today, and they will follow that up by dropping salt on the roads. So the snow, thankfully for us, is going to be fluffy and light, which is going to help with our mitigation purposes. We have a 40% chance of 12 to 16 inches, a 25% chance of 16 to 20 inches of snow. Best case scenario for wind gusts, we're projected at 25 miles per hour. Worst case is 32 miles per hour for our wind gusts. And we will have an Eversource representative at the EOC if necessary, as well as other representatives from other departments here in the city. And again, we are in full coordination as a city, PD, Public Works, Fire, in regards to ensuring that we're all on the same page to get us through the storm. Also included in those dialogues and conversation, of course, is Hartford Public Schools leadership. We will be ready for this storm. And you as elected officials, we will keep you informed on our progress, any developments that you need to be made aware of. Recent community partnerships. The Hartford Foundation, as we've already partnered with the Greater Hartford Arts Council to disseminate personal protective equipment for their membership. We assisted in the dissemination of $100,000 worth of PPE to 34 different agencies just 2 months ago. And Hartford Foundation asked us to assist Connecticut After School Network to do the exact same thing. So we will assist them with not only procuring $100,000 worth of PPE, but also disseminate that to the summer camps that are going to be in operation here this summer. So we're excited about that partnership and the continued relationship that we have with the Hartford Foundation. We also recently have collected toys for the Salvation Army and City Hall for the city's toy drive. That has been going extremely well. We have gathered and collected hundreds of toys. We will take possession of a box truck full of toys from Toys for Tots here by the end of the week. So our toy drive has been extremely, extremely productive, and we're very excited about putting smiles on our kids' faces come Christmas. FireStat, Chief Barco will go over the FireStat data for you in just a moment. And the last portion of my brief, I just wanted to share with you pictures of 2 of our new engines. Last month, I showed you pictures of our new heavy rescue. Myself and Superintendent Dan Madden, who is in the picture with me, we both went to North Attleboro, Massachusetts last week to actually look at and inspect our 2 beautiful new apparatus that are going to be assigned to Engine 2 as well as Engine 5. So great pieces of equipment. On behalf of all of our firefighters, we thank you, Court of Common Council, for your continued support to ensure the men and women of Hartford Fire Department has the absolute best equipment that's out there to do their jobs. And that concludes my portion of the presentation before I hand it over to Chief Barco. Through you, Mr. Chair, are there any questions for me?
Yes, I have a few questions, and I'll make them quick. The air purification, how does it function? What's the, I know it circulates air, but is it, how large is the unit? What's the square feet it handles?
Sure, great question, sir. So it's actually a AERUS, AERUS unit, and it uses ultraviolet light to actually purify the air and recirculate it. It's good for approximately 2,500 square feet. You literally turn the dial. There's a different setting for the force of air you would like to use, whether it be just barely on recirculating if you're in a small room to full bore. Even though if it's turned all the way up, it's not an irritating or distracting sound. It's not loud at all, but it actually uses ultraviolet light to purify the air and recycle the air that's in a room. But it goes through the ultraviolet light to disinfect any kind of contaminants that may be in the room. Not only air, but it also cleans surfaces through that process.
That's awesome. Can you send that information to the entire council, please?
Sure. The information on the unit?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Not a problem.
And also, I have a question. So the CDC protocol changed that if you go and test and you test negative, there is no longer a 14-day waiting period. I believe they reduced it down to 7 days, possibly 10. And I'm wondering, are you following that protocol, or are we following the state, which is the 14 days?
Right now, as it stands right now, we're still following 14 days.
14 days.
Yes,
all
sir.
Right. And I also, I want to congratulate you and your men and women, firefighters, for, doing a tremendous job with the ISO and retaining the Class 1 designation. And I know that, due to the COVID and everything else that's been going on in the year of 2020, it's unfortunate that we weren't able to assemble in the council chamber so that we can award the fire department. But I am looking forward to doing the presentation, presenting the fire department with several awards, hopefully in the beginning of the new year. So, I want to thank you and your men and women for that. And my last question is emergency contact numbers for down trees and power lines. Do we have anything?
For whose actual emergency contact info? You're talking about utility companies?
Well, I'm not sure. So if, for anyone in the neighborhood, if there's a huge tree that goes across a tree or on a house, or power lines are down, is there a specific number we can call?
Well, in those instances, Mr. Councilman, I'd recommend they dial 911 so we can
Okay.
promptly get out there. And if it's, and then we will start the process of contacting Eversource if it involves down power lines. But if a tree falls on a house, I would highly recommend that citizen just dial 911.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any questions from council? And, you have to speak because I can't see all the, everyone that's on.
Councilman Sanchez?
Yes, okay, Councilwoman Rossetti.
I just wanted to say thank you, as I do every time, because I really just appreciate your efforts, the department. I know the times, particularly in my other hat, we have oftentimes maybe more than folks would like. The fire department comes to the open hearth. So I really want to thank all of the department and you for just all year, and particularly the last 9 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Councilwoman, and also thank you, Mr. Sanchez, for the compliments on the firefighters. Again, myself, Chief Barkle, Chief Riley, we're extremely proud of our firefighters. They work extremely hard, and I could not be happier with what they do on a daily basis, and we're just so appreciative of what they do and what they sacrifice. So thank you for acknowledging them.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Majority Leader.
Chief, thank you very much for your presentation so far. Congratulations on successful the Class 1 designation. Continue to have a Class 1 designation under the ISO standards. Just a couple of things. When a pole gets knocked out, that actually has a street light on it, how long does it take for the pole to be replaced? And how long does it take for whether it's the city or Eversource to replace the street light that was knocked down due to a car accident?
That's a great question, Mr. Councilman. And first off, thank you again for the compliments. Our firefighters, they truly appreciate it. And we as leadership appreciate it as well. So for a lot of people don't know that there's a distinction between a wooden pole and a metal pole in the city. The decorative black poles are city lights. All the wooden poles are Eversource. So some folks get them confused, intermingled, or they automatically think that all the street lights in the city belong to Eversource. But the black decorative lights are the responsibility of the city of Hartford. So for us, there's a lot more control on the replacement of those lights. If it is a black decorative light, Public Works, they do have spares at the yard, so they do extremely well with getting that light replaced. If it is a wooden Eversource pole, there has been instances to where we have had to follow up with our Eversource partners to get that pole replaced. There was an instance, I believe, in the West End, just either earlier this year or late last year, to where we had to wait a few months. But we stayed on Eversource and they came out and replaced it. So to answer your question, Mr. Councilman, the black decorative pole, you typically see no more than a 2-week turnaround. The wooden poles, you can literally see up to a few months, unfortunately, because that's just out of our control.
Yeah, that is unfortunate, but I will follow up with you offline about the particular pole and area that I'm asking about. And I just wanted to know that do you foresee a shortage of PPEs for the city of Hartford as we continue to operate in this pandemic, and as to have testing and just for staff, the city employees, to have these PPEs for safety precautions?
Absolutely no shortage at all, Mr. Councilman. We're doing extremely well on our inventory for COVID-19 related personal protective equipment. There hasn't been a department head that has asked for PPE that has not received it literally within 24 hours. So we're doing extremely well. We have zero concerns with the inventory of our PPE for COVID-19.
Thank you very much. And congrats again.
And I'd like to follow up on the as far as the Eversource utility poles, Chief. Do they still have a metal numeric numbers nailed onto the poles as the, I guess, the identifier for each pole?
Yes, sir, they do.
So when the pole is called in, they have to have that specific number, correct?
Absolutely, yes, sir. And if there's any pole that poses a safety issue, all street lights are important. But if there's one that poses a safety issue, like we had in the West End, it was literally cracked and leaning over dangerously. Then I would just recommend that someone get me that information, make me aware of it, and then I can get on to Eversource and we could get them out there in an expeditious manner.
Well, there's one that I can see that actually is a broken one. It's attached to a standing one and is tied together by some wire.
Yes, sir. If you get me that info, I'll get on that. We're gonna have a challenge because of the storm coming up,
Right.
but I'm pretty sure we can have Eversource attention on it early next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have any questions for the chief? Okay, y'all set, chief.
Well, actually, sir, I would hand it over to Chief Barco for Fire Stat.
Yeah.
So Assistant Chief Rodney Barco, the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, everyone. As you've seen before, our fire response scorecard, the first slide is for structure fires, and it ranges from a whole year from November to November. The last 3 months, we was at 100%. The performance card is rated for the first arriving engine at a structure fire in under 6 minutes and 20 seconds. And as you can see, for the last 3 months, we were at 100%. If you look at August, that was data that was lost due to the ransomware attack, but your firefighters have been performing admirably in this category. The next response scorecard is for EMS, and that measurement time is arrival of 5 minutes or less for a first responder call, and that's based on the national standard of 1710. And as you can see, the last 3 months, we were ranging between 80 and 77%. Again, it's average. It's extremely difficult to get to the 90%. So if you look at these numbers nationwide, your firefighters are performing admirably. So emergency response data. This next slide is based on NRZs. The first EMS card is, we had a total of 1,516 calls for service. And as you can see, the number on the right where it says incident type, and then the description is EMS calls excluding vehicle accidents with injury, and the count is 863 calls of that type. If you look into the shaded map area, you can see Asylum Hill, Northeast, and Berry Square had the most calls for service in the month of November. The next slide is rescue calls. For the month of November, we had a total of 25 calls, with a lockout being the highest number of calls for service with a count of 11. Asylum Hills, South Green, and Frog Hollow, Berry Square had the most calls for service of this type. The next slide is for Narcan administered. For the month of November, we had a total of 21, keeping in mind that this data does not track whether Narcan saved a life or not, but it just tracks whether it was administered. And as you can see, Northeast had a total of 4, Frog Hollow 3, and then you had probably three or four more in Berry Square. So this next slide is all fires for the month of November. We had a total of 45 calls. Passenger vehicle fire with a total count of 12. Building fires for a count of 9. And as you can see, Northeast, Asylum Hill, Frog Hollow, Berry Square, and South End had between 8 and 5 calls for service for the month of November. This last slide is the location of structure fires in relation to the fire station. And as you can see, Engine 7 had 8 calls for certain. Well, I'm sorry, if you look at where you see Engine 7 is, the number next to it correlates to the right-hand column, which is the incident number. And It shows stats for firefighter fatalities, firefighter injury, civilian casualties, civilian injured, and the cause of determination of the fire. Any questions or comments on the fire response scorecards?
Yes, Chief Barco, I have two questions, and I'll ask the first one is going to be about the Narcan use. Has that been steadily less than last year, the same time in November, and also with the rest of the year? What's the comparison?
Sir, it's between different neighborhoods. It kind of differs the number, but it doesn't go up by much. It's been pretty steady, the same as last year throughout the year.
Okay, so is it safe to say that it's been a fairly reduced from the year before? Because I know last year was it was a serious issue.
Mr. Councilman, this is Chief Freeman. I'd say
Yes.
for that, I just want to reiterate those numbers that we show for Narcan is only what the fire department does. That's not
Okay.
what ambulance providers or HPD distributes. And our numbers have been about on par for last year, if not slightly higher for Narcan distribution. Now,
Okay.
something to take notice of, Blue Hills, you saw one administering of Narcan for Blue Hills for this month. Last month, it was one. All of 2019, the fire department did not distribute Narcan not one time in Blue Hills neighborhood. So that's an example of how that statistic is slightly changing in the city, or that demographic rather, in regards to how it's impacting all 17 of our different neighborhoods.
All right, and then my other question, we had this conversation a few years ago, so I'm just curious. We accepted the tentative agreement for the fire department firefighters, right?
Yes, sir.
But what I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, and we were talking about how are we going to at least acquire ambulances or offer, be able to, service our residents in an ambulatory response. I mean, are we looking forward to acquiring smaller vehicles rather than sending these large apparatuses for calls for broken ankle, what have you?
That's a great question, Mr. Councilman. My office continues to have those discussions with Ms. Montanez as we try to figure out what right looks like. There's obviously different models that are out there. We have had discussions about trying to pursue us being the fire department, exclusively providing ambulance transportation, both non-emergency and emergency. We talked about having a hybrid to where we have, say, 2 or 3 ambulances in the city, and then we would still rely on Aetna or AMR to provide all the excess calls that may be received. Or we talked about just going on contract with AMR or Aetna, which we currently do not have a contract with them to provide ambulance services. So we have looked at SUVs, we've looked at pickup trucks, all those things that you have mentioned, Mr. Councilman, and probably those discussions that are being had at the Court of Common Council. All of those are on the table, and still we are having in-depth discussion about options, but we have not made a determination on exactly what right looks like. And a lot of that, just to be honest with you, cost is a driving factor. Looking at approximately $6.6 million to actually stand up our own ALS transport services, and that's part of the discussion as well. The return on our investment, what would that look like? So we're still trying to figure all of that out.
So have we, and this is my last question, so have we received any kind of calls that's related to COVID?
Any calls related to COVID?
Right, someone with a serious fever that needs an ambulance, or the fire department called in 911, and then the ambulance come over and take over, or because sometimes you have some individuals that they feel they don't have any symptoms, and within 3 days they just collapse. That
Yes.
ends up being with COVID-19, virus.
Yep.
Have we received any kind of calls like that we can use, as the data to try and and get some funding from the federal government under the CARES Act?
So great question, sir. Yeah, so we respond on a daily to COVID-19 related calls, and it could be from minor signs and symptoms to serious signs and symptoms, to where someone is unconscious and unresponsive, or someone has a consistent high fever and they finally decided to dial 911. So those calls for service continue to come in, and we with being the fire department and the police department, respond to those calls, and the ambulance providers, depending on what part of the city. If it's in the south end, it's Aetna ASM. If it's in the north end, it's AMR that would respond to actually transport the patient to the hospital. So yes, sir, we are responding to those calls.
Okay, so I'm just hoping that we could use that data to leverage some funding. And I also, I want to thank Chief Barco for the presentation. It was great, and continue the good work.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone on council here that wants to ask any other questions of the chiefs from HFD? No? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too. So now we're moving on to the comp staff for the Hartford Police Department. We have Chief Cody with us and Chief Medina, Assistant Chief Medina. Good evening, gentlemen. And I also like to say that we just been joined by Council President Molly Rosado and also Councilman McDum.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Again, hello to all of our council members from public safety and beyond. Thanks for having us here again. I'll get right into the presentation if I can figure out how to share my screen. You'd think that we would be used to this by now.
Share. There's a share button on the bottom. Chief.
Got it. Thanks.
I'm here for you.
Did it work?
Yes.
You did. You're good. You're good to go, Chief.
Okay. All right, that's good. All right, so just quickly, we're going to go through a crime update. We're going to go through our current internal investigation into the text message regarding the Deadpool betting in major crimes. We're going to go through just some information on an update on our cultural competency training and just a slide on our accountability and where we are with that year to date. So this message, I sent out the full CompStat package to everybody on public safety, and it's also available on our website, but this is kind of the summary. We are looking at a year-to-date increase of 11.8%. We'll talk about what the drivers of that are coming up, but a lot of that is due to aggravated assaults and shooting increases this year, and a lot of that is also due to a significant increase in larceny, which we're going to get more in depth into in a moment. The top line where you start on the left, we talk about this week and this year compared to this same week in last year. Last year we had 90 Part 1 crimes. This year 89, a drop of 1.1%. The next box shows the 28-day period from last year compared to the past 28-day periods of this year, where we're up 24%. A lot of that is due to robbery and larceny activity, as you can see in that slide. And then, as I said, year to date, 11.8% up, but 13.7% down when compared to 2 years ago, and 20% down when compared to 3 years ago. We're cognizant of kind of what the rest of the country and other communities are going through in crime spikes. We are fortunate that we are not seeing as much of an increase, but it is still an increase that we are working very diligently to reduce. So the next two boxes that you see on the middle of the screen are the previous week. So our last week compared to the week before, where we're down 16.8%, and the previous 28 days in this year compared to our last 28 days, where we're down 3.1%. Those numbers are indicative of a trend downward in crime that we're looking for as we continue to work on some of these hot issues that we'll talk about. While our violent crime activity and our shootings have seen a decrease, we are still we're not letting go of our hold on getting out there and getting the guns and making arrests when it comes to violent crime and trying to prevent violent crime. So what that bottom shows is just the violent crime: homicide by gun, assault one gun, shots fired confirmed, and shots fired unconfirmed for a period of October 11th to November 7th, and then compared to the period of November 8th to December 5th. So as you can see, our assault ones are down by 44%. Homicides are the same, 1 versus 1. Our shots fired confirmed still trending in the right direction, down by 9% or 5 incidents, and shots fired unconfirmed down by 3.81%. So all told, down by almost just short of 10% in our violent crime look and our gun-related crime look. Next slide is our firearm recoveries. We went over this same slide last time that we spoke. Between November 15th and December 15th, we seized 21 guns by arrest. And then we also seized an additional 36 guns for our gun buyback that we conducted at Willie Ware on Saturday the 12th, last Saturday. You can see that picture on the right-hand side. Those were the 36 guns that were turned in through the gun buyback program. Of those 36 guns, 5 of them were assault rifles. You can kind of see them in the picture, including one fully automatic handgun, which you can see on the left side towards the bottom of that picture as well. Now, all told, in this last month, we've recovered 57 firearms and taken 57 guns off the streets in Hartford in those 2 fashions. Spoke about this a little already. We're seeing that 11.8 Part 1 crime increase. That's a reduction from 2018 and 2017. One of our biggest drivers is our larcenies from motor vehicles. Our larcenies are up 224 incidents this year compared to last year. Of those 224, 60%, a little over 60%, are from a motor vehicle or a theft of a motor vehicle parts, which could be license plates or it could be rims, as we know. That brings us to a bit of a trend that we're seeing out there. 2020 seems to be the year of the trend in crime. We've seen nuisance crimes like fireworks. We've seen street racers. We've seen parties. We've seen an increase in shootings. The next trend that we're dealing with appears to be smash and grab larcenies from motor vehicles. Next slide here talks about specifics. Over the last 2 months, especially October and November, we have seen a significant increase and also a change in how these crimes are occurring. Individuals have gone from, going down the street and trying doors and essentially going after the low-hanging fruit or the doors that are open, and they've converted into smashing the windows and rummaging through vehicles and grabbing as many valuables as they can. What we know is they appear to be, and it's bolded here in this presentation, they appear to be operating groups of 3 or more individuals. They target commercial and residential parking areas where we see large numbers of cars, and especially during the overnight hours all the way up until dawn. We've seen them as late as 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning occurring, which makes it difficult for us to put special details out there, but we have dedicated a special group, 1 sergeant and 6 officers to combat this increase and this spike. We've also put one of the sergeants for major crimes and 2 detectives for major crimes on this to do follow-up work. And we've also assigned our crime scene division to do work on forensic evidence. Sometimes we get folks that cut themselves on the glass, fingerprints left on cars, things like that. So we are working very diligently to try to get these numbers back under control. Again, we use a barometer of how we're doing and compared to other areas. These similar instances are occurring around the city of Hartford. East Hartford has had approximately 100 of these cars broken into in the last month, 34 from one specific location, a hotel. Newington had more than 100 cars broken into in one night, and Meriden had 40 vehicles the next day broken into in the overnight, all believed to be the same MO and likely the same individuals. So if you look at the fact that our larcenies are up by 224 year to date, If you just take one night in Newington and one night in Meriden, that's 140 of them, and you add the 1 month of larcenies in East Hartford, that's 240 larcenies right there that other communities around us are seeing. I think that that's attributable to the presence that we have, the number of officers that we have, the fact that we have a real intelligence-driven model here that responds very quickly to these trends, and we put officers in these parking lots, and we can be very nimble and respond quickly. So we have not, while we have seen a real car break issue that we will address, we certainly have not seen it to the extent of some of these other surrounding communities. And these are just a couple of headlines from those incidents in both Newington and in Meriden. Some of the other things that we're doing about it, like I said, we have a task force to address this. I went over that already. That also includes people from crime analysis. It's very important to look at trends and locations in these instances. And we are focusing on these areas where we have a large number of cars that are left unattended in the overnight hours. If you see a ticket on your car, it might not be a ticket. What we have here is basically one side that looks just like a parking ticket. The other side is just a warning that an officer in the area has noticed maybe that you might have left some valuables in your vehicle, and it's just a notification to please secure your valuables. Again, these are crimes of opportunity, and target hardening is a big way to reduce these numbers. So our officers are out in force, especially in the North Meadows, especially in Southeast, and especially in areas that tend to be kind of quiet, where there's not a lot of foot traffic and stuff in the overnight hours. They also are hitting areas in the West End, streets that are densely populated with cars with valuables in them. So our officers are knocking on doors, talking to folks, and just trying to get the message across, not to leave your valuables exposed in your car. We are finding that at least one or two of the vehicles usually have valuables that are visible, so the individuals that are doing this know where to go and smash and grab. They're in and out very quickly. They smash. Like I said, there's about three of them. Most of the video and most of the analytics that we've seen show about three that work in concert with one another. Smash a bunch of windows. They're in and out very quickly, and oftentimes before the light goes on the front step, they're back in the car and they're gone. They're also using stolen cars to perpetrate these crimes, so it's very difficult to track them because the car is oftentimes stolen. That is our kind of crime update at this point. If there is any questions specific to crime, I'll pause and answer them now.
Yes, I have two questions, Chief. Well, not just one. So the gun buyback program that's being held at the Willie Ware, I don't recall that program being done in the South End. Are we planning to do anything like that in the South End?
There's not another gun buyback planned right now, but in historically, I believe they have had them in different locations within the city. I can't remember specifically. I can look into it and I get back to you on where they've been. But yes, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do a gun buyback in the South End. It's usually in partnership with St. Francis, Hartford Hospital, CCMC. That's where we get a lot of the support to do this. But yeah, we can certainly look into doing one in the South End. Okay,
thank you. And I'd like to thank you for the idea of the ticket warning. That does, I'm pretty sure that does help. When do we start that program?
We got them printed up. We kind of put a rush on it because we didn't want to get them in just in time for the larcenies to be kind of that trend to be over. So we started handing them out probably about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago.
Okay, great idea. Is there anyone on council that has any questions? If you do, please speak up. I can't see everyone.
Councilman Sanchez, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Micdom.
Thank you, Chief. Do you know? I don't know if you all figured this out straight away. Those guns, those 57 guns, where they came, not where they came from, like the buyback program, but how did they get out into the world? Were they stolen? Were they come from other states? Or do we know that?
Yes, we do. So last month, I've talked to Councilman LeBron. That's one of the popular questions that he asks me. We had a pretty busy week, so the intelligence division did not formulate that report for me yet, but I'll put it out by email to council as soon as I get that info. It breaks it down by state like we did last month. Unfortunately, that information wasn't readily available to me. The same folks that do that research are the ones that did the gun buyback on Saturday. So they will give me a report on that I will gladly forward on to show you what states they come from, which ones are stolen, and so on and so forth. Basically, what we know about them. Just so for context, that's done by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They do our gun tracing for us, so we're somewhat at the mercy of them. Although they do usually do it in a pretty timely manner.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we may continue, Chief.
No,
Okay.
I have something. Sorry.
Oh.
Can I say something?
Okay.
I couldn't
Okay,
unmute
Councilman.
myself. Good evening,
Okay, Councilwoman.
Chief, Assistant Chief. Quick question. You guys are in this business. The doorbells that people get, the what are they
The
called?
ring.
Ring, and
Are those useful? I mean, I know now they talk about people can now attack those. I mean, is it worth people's time and effort? And does it help you guys in any way to have those doorbells?
I think I'll let Assistant Chief Medina jump in as well, but I think they're great. I know for a fact that he has one, so he can talk a little bit about how his works. There's a bunch of companies out there that it's not just Ring, so that we're not we're not doing a commercial on just one of them. But if any resident is interested in something like that, we have C4, which is a division that deals almost exclusively with technology and especially camera technology. And Sergeant Mastriani is great. I put him in touch with people all the time. If they want our input on what we think works and what's the best quality and what we get for bang for the buck. I think those cameras are great. I mean, they don't just catch crimes. You see these videos all the time of like people delivering packages and chucking them upstairs and not, and some of that stuff is criminal. We know that people snipe packages off of people's front steps. Those Ring cameras are great. We do have an extensive camera system in the city, but it doesn't, a lot of times doesn't capture the front of people's houses. So I think they're great. Also, Senator Fonfara has worked with us in the past on the public-private partnership where the police department can put a camera at somebody's residence as long as they allow us to use their bandwidth, their Wi-Fi to get the images back to C4. We are looking to expand that program. So I encourage folks out there, if they're interested in something like that, to get a hold of us. We have had people that have asked, especially through council members, and they've been turned down. And the only reason that we would do that is if we have a camera in that proximity. We don't want to be redundant. We're looking to have cameras in areas that we don't normally have cameras. But I think they're very cost effective. I think they're very useful. And I will shut up at this point and let the expert.
No, thank you. That's very useful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chief Medina has one, so I'll let him go.
No, I actually do. I actually have two. I have one for my the front door, and I have one for my the rear of my yard that activate based on motion. And I would tell you that they're absolutely fantastic. They capture the video, they store it as long as, there's a fee involved, but they store it on their server. And I could probably show you one right now that I have for West End, because what comes with it is the neighborhood community. So people in the neighborhoods, they actually post images or people stealing packages. So I don't know if you could see this, but this is a West End. It's somebody stealing the package off somebody's porch on the West End.
We can see it. Wow.
Yeah. And I think my colleagues know, because I had an incident at my house. Unfortunately, my house was paintballed. And, I just, want myself and my family to be safe. And that was something I wanted to know about. So
that was posted 2 hours ago, and that's 1.4 miles from my house, where it tells you here in the West End of Hartford. And with that, when someone does that, that video is saved. It can be given to us, and we could try and identify the individuals who are doing this. And on the flip side, the one I have in my backyard, ironically, I've captured deer, coyotes, I've captured bobcats, and I've had a bear come through my backyard. So not only do I have people stealing packages, I have wildlife in the city of Hartford. So I'm thankful for the ring system. But it's a great tool. It is. And I promote it to everyone.
And Councilwoman Rossetti, it is so effective that my wife and I were in Florida, and at 4 a.m, our phone rang. It'll alert you on your cell phone. And when we looked at it, it looked like either a bobcat or of some sort. And then when we came here and put it on the larger screen, this is 4 a.m in Florida. It was actually a deer right at my front door. So depending, you could be anywhere in the country as long as you have the internet service as well, of course.
Councilman, did he ring your doorbell?
No, he just looked at me.
Oh.
Okay. Anyone else?
Did he have a red nose?
No. Okay. Okay, Chief.
All right. So moving on to the investigation into the text message, I'll just do a quick kind of recap. I think, I've sent out correspondence to everybody on council as well as others. I think most of this might be a recap, but just an update of where we are now. On Friday, the 4th, the command staff, myself, and Assistant Chief Medina became aware of a group message that involved a text message that was sent out to a group of people 2 days earlier on Wednesday the 2nd by a major crimes detective. That text message was regarding a wager or an offer for a wager about where the first homicide in 2021 would occur, and it was labeled the Major Crimes Dead Pool. It is clear that this activity is reprehensible. It is damaging to both the department and the community, and it is a violation of the code of conduct. So that day on Friday, when we first became aware of it, I took immediate action in transferring the detective out of the Major Crimes Division and into an administrative backgrounds function within the department, so that he would not have contact with the public or victims or anyone for that matter during the investigation. I also had him written up for conduct unbecoming an officer, which is code of conduct violation. There is a couple ways that occurs in the department. One, if there is anything that needs to be investigated, any ambiguity, any thing that needs further investigation, we will conduct an investigation before we write somebody up. And then if that investigation points to misconduct or a code of conduct violation, we will then issue that Form 90 or a write-up form to the employee. In this case, I thought on its face it was misconduct. I didn't need an investigation to tell me that it was misconduct. We all agreed here on how egregious it was. So there was no immediate investigation. There was immediate action, and that was writing the detective up and transferring the detective. That Monday, that was on Friday. That Monday, we also on that Friday, I initiated a formal investigation into the rest of the thread, into whatever else could surround this incident. So we go into that a little bit more in the next slide here, but that investigation, and I'll skip ahead to the bottom half of this slide. That investigation is looking into many things. It's going to determine the origin of this dead pool. It's going to ascertain who participated in the planning and execution of the pool, not just who sent the text. Identify what actions supervisors took, if any, when they were made aware of the text. If there was communications beyond the thread, if there were individual texts, if there were conversations, if there was anything beyond what we know now, if any similar conduct has occurred in the past, and basically any other issues that come up during the course of this investigation that we feel need to be looked into further. Captain Jeff Russo is conducting that investigation. He is the commander of the Detective Bureau. The reason for that is that the Internal Affairs Division goes as high as lieutenant, and there was a lieutenant that was on the thread. So we don't have lieutenants investigate other lieutenants. We have a rank above investigate. So Captain Russo was assigned this investigation. He is one of our 2 department advocates. He's familiar with the disciplinary process. I've every level of confidence that he'll do a thorough and an in-depth investigation. And again, it is him because he is a rank above the highest ranking person that is involved in the investigation that we know of right now. If he runs into a situation where it goes higher, he'll come to me and potentially we'll address that then. That has not happened as of yet. Back to the top on December 8th, I determined that based on what we know, that is on December 8th is Monday, based on what we knew at the time, that Detective Placek could no longer serve in the capacity of detective, and he was demoted effective that Monday to the rank of officer for cause. And then he will remain in that admin assignment as an officer, the in-house assignment. Also on Monday, the commander of the Major Crimes Division, who was a recipient of the text and who is also our public information officer, I removed him from his position. I just feel that while this investigation is going on, that lieutenant cannot be the face of the organization. He can't be our public information officer, and he can't effectively lead the Major Crimes Division until that investigation concludes and finds out exactly what his conduct was or was not. So he was temporarily reassigned to the detention division, and the detention commander, Lieutenant Aaron Boisvert, was assigned as the Major Crimes Commander during this investigation. And he's also trained as a public information officer. So him and Assistant Chief Medina have taken over the public information officer's role while this investigation is being conducted. Sorry. Steps going forward. So the disciplinary process, our process here at HPD is always complex because it's a lot different than the fire department and many other departments within the city, and that's by contract and by policy, union contract and policy. So along with the demotion, the Major Crimes Detective faces a suspension of up to 120 days. That was my decision as of Monday. That is the longest suspension that I can think of in recent history. And that is my recommendation. The employee has the option to accept the discipline or to take it to a disciplinary hearing. In this case, the officer is taking it to a hearing with the union. That due process hearing will happen on December 29th. The hearing officer will make a recommendation to me based on that hearing and based on everything that's presented by both the employee and the department advocate. In this case, the department advocate is Lieutenant Bauza because Captain Russo, who is my other department advocate, is actually doing the investigation. Those guys are considered prosecutors for me in those, for the department in those disciplinary hearings. They present the case against the employee, and then the union and the employee present their defense. It is a nuclear, I always refer to it as a nuclear laudermill hearing. If Natalie wants to jump in on that, she oftentimes serves as our Corporation Counsel's evidence officer in those hearings. They require a member of Corporation Counsel to be there. They require a hearing officer, and then both the department advocate and the employee that faces the discipline. That discipline, as I said, will commence on the 29th. After that, I make the final decision about whatever penalty is appropriate, and the employee can appeal my decision to both the city HR, which is a step 3 grievance, and then beyond to the labor board as a step 4 grievance. In this particular case, I also require the officer to undergo a fitness for duty evaluation before he returns to work after whatever suspension is levied. I think that's important given the state we are in 2020, given the mental health concerns that a lot of people have for officers, given how unorthodox this behavior was. I think there's a lot of things that point here to some potential issues that go beyond just such a horrendous decision and go potentially into the realm of mental health issues. So, I think in the interest of everyone, he needs to successfully complete a fitness for duty evaluation before he is allowed to come back to work. In addition to that, he will also be required to participate in and actually has volunteered through the union to participate in a restorative justice program that we will formulate with community partners in the coming weeks and months. Sorry, I must have not been moving there. So that restorative justice model, includes interaction with members of the community and this officer and myself and other members of the department and the command staff, where there's an open exchange of dialogue where the officer can understand just how impactful that text message was on the community, and the community gets to understand the person that was involved in it. There's a level of rebuilding and understanding. It is the specifics of that model will be worked out in the coming weeks, but that is also the fourth tier of discipline and remedy that I implement. Addressing this issue within the HPD going forward, similar to what I do with the transparency to the community, I do that internally as well. Email went out immediately. Explaining the circumstances, explaining what happened, explaining the ramifications, and explaining my expectations going forward. In addition to that, there are many that I've talked to, both in council and beyond, that have expressed that they are just tired of dealing with this time and time again. And I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't echo those sentiments anymore. So in this particular situation, I have begun to meet. In fact, I'm about 3/4 of the way through meeting with every supervisor in the department, from Assistant Chief Medina through the deputy chiefs, through the captains, all of which I've met with. Every single lieutenant and every single sergeant in this building, I am meeting with in person to talk about this and my expectations of accountability moving forward. And in no uncertain terms, laying out my belief that if you fail to supervise, you are always more wrong than the person that conducted the misconduct. It is our responsibility as supervisors to hold our officers accountable, and the failure at that level is inexcusable. So beyond an email, those in-person meetings will continue this week and next week. Into the midnight shift. I'm coming in to make sure I'm address the midnight officers as well, but we are almost through every supervisor in the department as of this point. In addition to that, we've implemented a duty commander. I believe that, in this particular case, that we had folks up to the level of lieutenant involved in this. I want a broader and more expansive oversight in this department. So the duty commander consists of a captain or deputy chief on a weekly rotation that'll work evening shifts, usually Tuesday through Saturday. They will work until midnight. They'll be touching the roll calls for the midnight shift officers. They'll be touching the roll calls of the evening shift officers. They will be conducting inspections and oversight on what the lieutenants are doing and how they're holding their sergeants accountable and how the sergeants are holding the officers accountable. There is a list of duties that this duty commander will need to complete. They need to be out there at every critical incident. They need to be monitoring the radio, and they need to be setting the standard for supervision both at the first line supervisor level, the sergeant level, and at the mid-management level with the lieutenants going forward. We are in week 3 or week 4 of that. It has generally worked out pretty well. I have also been out there on evening shifts, stepping out on calls, talking to supervisors, talking to officers, and expressing expectations in person. Obviously, that includes the stressing of what we can do to prevent these future incidents through accountability, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a slide or two. And then addressing this issue within the community. Our goal is to remain as transparent as possible throughout this entire process, up to, obviously starting with the emails that I sent out to community partners, religious leaders, members of council, and elected officials as well, keeping everyone apprised of what we're doing and where we're headed. Developing that restorative justice model is another big piece of that. It educates the officers as well as the community about public trust and what it means, and helps to start rebuild the relationship and the pieces of the relationship that we've lost in this incident. And then just continuing to have an open dialogue with folks through COVID. As we've said before, it's challenging, but being on the phone, calling people, dropping in person where I can, as long as it's capable of doing it safely. And that's important for to do that both formally and informally. Some questions came my way about where we are with the diversity and cultural competency training that we talked about. This slide is a little bit backwards, it looks like, so I'm going to start with this one first. So we looked into this cultural competency back, when I was going through the confirmation process. It was something that a lot of folks thought would be beneficial, and we started that process back in February, March of 2020. In June, after we knew we were in the middle of COVID, we had to kind of shift gears a little bit. So instead of waiting, we had folks in the training academy and folks in the command staff had reached out and found a lot of good programs out there, but the ability to do that in person during COVID was just not feasible. So we wanted to start a foundation and lay a foundation for this cultural competency training, even if it couldn't be in person. This is the type of training that I don't believe, as somebody that's been a certified trainer here in the police department since 2005, I really don't believe that this is the best type of training to do online. I don't think you get the impact. I don't think you get the exchange with an instructor. But I also thought it was important to lay some foundations of understanding of what cultural competency is. And so we went out and we found a company called, I'm sorry, the program is up here, Diversity Builders. And we engaged with them to build a ground up cultural competency program and diversity program online. No one had that readily available, so they worked with our academy staff and our trainers here from June, when I approved the Diversity Builders as the vendor, up through November to build a cultural competency online program just for HPD. So that program has been approved, and it is in the pipeline to go out. Unfortunately, we have a mandatory sexual harassment training that comes out of City Hall that officers have until the end of December to complete. That is also online. So we are going to roll this out right after the first of the year, so that we're not competing with the mandate for the sexual harassment training. And so this will begin to roll out right after the first of the year. This is a brief overview of the program. I will be able to get out more specifics. And actually, I think, members of council can even see this program, this training program, if they'd like. I certainly don't see any problem with that. It talks about, and we can go through these individual, but it talks about concepts related to diversity, inclusion, establishing trust in diverse communities, introduction to cultural competency, the science of bias, why it exists, types of bias, negative impacts of bias on law enforcement, how to resolve bias and cultural responsibility, becoming an inclusive communicator, intent versus impact in communication. I think that's really important, especially in law enforcement, because I don't think that, that officers often understand the disconnect that's there, and they say, well, that's not what I meant. And oftentimes that's how it's received. Creating a culture of intentional inclusion and de-escalation through inclusive communication. So my thought here is that this is not going to be the end-all program. My thought here is this is going to be a real foundation to build on with in-person training as soon as we're capable of doing that. And coupled with our fair and impartial policing program, we kind of started fair and impartial policing. We brought that to the state here in Hartford, and it has been adopted as the Police Officer Standards and Training Council as a mandatory training regimen. I'm hoping that we can build a diversity and cultural competency training program that is also adopted by the Police Officer Standards and Training Council. So we'll be working on that going forward as well. A lot of talk about the culture within the department. I understand that. One of the things that, I guess if folks consider this a political position, one of the things that I ran on, for lack of a better term, is accountability. And the numbers here are pretty powerful. An advocate number is any time that a supervisor, whether it's a sergeant all the way up through me as the chief of police, pulls a number that is associated with disciplining an officer. That is an advocate number. So anytime misconduct is found, a complaint is sustained, or so on and so forth, where discipline is found to be necessary, an advocate number is pulled. If you look at it, in 2017, we pulled 35. In 2018, we pulled 43. In 2019, we pulled 94. And up to date, in 2020, we've pulled 189. Those things range from holding people accountable for car accidents all the way up through egregious misconduct. Every time an officer is written up and held accountable by way of discipline, an advocate number is pulled. And then we look at our citizen complaint stats from 2012 all the way through 2019, going from, roughly 3.3% sustained in a year, 5% sustained in a year, 4.7% sustained in a year, 4.8, 6.2, 6.8, and then we get to 2018, where Chief Rosado came in, and we jumped to 24% in 2019, 22.1% of sustained complaints, and then so far up to date, as we sit right now in 2020, 30.77% sustained complaints. Accountability is about looking at what your officers are doing, setting expectations, and when those expectations are not met, taking corrective action. That is accountability in a nutshell. Culture doesn't change overnight, and it will take some time, but I think that we are moving in the right direction. I have, a great support team that also has the same beliefs. Assistant Chief Medina, also comes from that same mentality. Like I said, I've not, we had a cultural analysis done here. I've been here for 25 years. No one's ever done that before, to look at really what the culture of the department is. So I think we look at that as well when we look at misconduct, especially, individual misconduct. And when we ask ourselves, and I know many of you on this call have asked yourselves, is this a culture of the department, or is this an individual? If you look through the cultural analysis, you see one of the strongest areas for HPD is its engagement in the community and its willingness to serve the community. Our officers through and through were found to be extremely, that one of their largest motivators is service to the community. I think we can, as an administration, we continue to look at that and we continue to try to make positive change. We continue to pursue accreditation. We're hoping to be able to get an on-site accreditation audit in the spring. Again, not to blame COVID for everything, but COVID-19 made that nearly impossible as people weren't coming and doing those kinds of analysis. So our Tier 1 accreditation on-site assessment, we're hoping to be able to do in the spring. We're not really able to schedule that yet because of COVID. We don't know where we're going to be. But policy development, training are the two foundations for setting the standard, and then accountability to those standards through supervision and discipline is really the recipe to change culture. If you look anywhere, setting policies that are sound and that the community can trust are national best practices. The way to do that is through using national policies and having to hold yourself accountable to national standards, which is exactly what accreditation does. And then training on those policies and training in other areas that are areas where you expect your officers to know certain things, cultural competency, implicit bias, in addition to motor vehicle law and domestic violence and other required areas. But following those policies and that training up with proper supervision and accountability through both retraining and discipline are key to changing culture. And that is something that I've been committed to since I started as interim chief and long before that. But that was really where I had an opportunity to make that my priority and this agency's priority as the chief here. With that, that's the slides. I'll just turn it over to Assistant Chief Medina if he has anything as a follow-up, and then we'll go into questions.
Thanks, Chief. I saw Councilman Mitchum had his hand up to ask a question. So,
yeah,
you can finish your part, then I'll ask my question. That's fine. Thank you.
I prefer you go first, Councilman.
okay. So I have a couple of questions before we move forward. So I want to start off with the investigation. So the Internal Affairs is performing the investigation here in the HPD, correct?
No.
No?
The commander of the Detective Bureau, Captain Jeff Russo, is conducting the investigation because the highest ranking individual in Internal Affairs is a lieutenant. There's a lieutenant involved in.
Okay.
So a member of my administration, Captain Jeff Russo, is conducting the investigation.
Okay. Now, will he be doing the investigation in conjunction with independent investigation from the outside?
Not at this time. He's assigned the investigation internally, and that's kind of how we've done our investigations. But as with any other investigation, I have no problems with an outside investigation. But in this particular case, I think it's prudent to complete this investigation by the captain, and then that investigation will be released if there's call that a parallel investigation or not a parallel, but a subsequent independent investigation be done. The discussion would have to be had. I have no issues with an independent investigation. Also, this investigation will be turned over to the state's attorney because there were at least 3 or 4 individuals from the court system that were on this text message thread as well. So she's going to take our investigation and then continue it with her staff as well.
Okay, and then now going with the cultural programs and the other programs that we're hoping that we can start. What's the timeline do you expect for this to happen? And are we going to start at the academy as well as during the tenure of a police officer?
Yeah, so the academy actually receives more training similar to this than the recertification requirements. In the academy, there is a day of implicit bias training, and then, to be recertified, cops get recertified every 3 years. The requirement hours for that type of training and recertification is much lower. So this is a training program that will be above and beyond the minimum requirements to be certified as a police officer, and we will be doing it here. They won't necessarily be doing it in other departments, but like implicit bias training, I'm hoping that it catches on, and I'm hoping that that post puts it as part of their training. So the short answer is they get that training in the academy. They will also get that training when they leave the academy. This particular training program, everyone in the department will get. The entire department will get that. We are also due for a refresher on the fair and impartial policing program, the implicit bias program that comes out of the Fair and Impartial Policing Institute in Florida, University of South Florida. We've just sent officers for their recert to do that training. But again, that is an in-person module of training. So we're a little bit at the will of COVID to be able to roll that out. But this training program is online, and it will roll out the first of the year.
Okay. So my next question, and I'm not sure why, but I have some concerns about this. The EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. Can you share with me how is your EAP program there? Who oversees the program? Is it confidential, and so forth? What can you share with me on that?
So we've had an EAP program here since I've been here. It has a detached member of the police department that is the EAP coordinator. That is their full-time job. They get a take-home car, an undercover take-home car, so that they can respond to incidents and they can respond to issues that come up. They get called upon for anything from officers having personal problems at home to stress. They've been involved in a lot of issues this year. We've had some particularly gruesome scenes that officers have had to go to. Just recently, we had an individual that tried to cut their own throat, and we had an officer there, holding their neck together, basically, and so EAP got involved in that. We've had some pretty significant events this year where EAP has come out. So we have the coordinator, and the coordinator is not the person that gives services to our officer. The coordinator puts them in touch with a company that we contract to do a professional that does that kind of, and then kind of it's a soft handoff from our coordinator to that company and to the doctors that are associated with that company, and then it is completely confidential.
So, has there ever been a survey amongst a police officer on how comfortable they feel using the existing EAP program?
I don't know if there's ever been a survey. I think it was touched on a little bit in the cultural analysis, but not specific. But we could certainly do that.
Okay, yeah, I would like to see that. I have now I'm not sure if this is proper for me to ask, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask, and you let me know if you're allowed to, or because a Privacy Act, or that you can't. It's been mentioned that there's several lawsuits against yourself, Assistant Chief Medina, HPD, and I've been trying to look into it, and from what I've gathered, and you can stop me if I'm going, if there's any privacy issues here, from what I've gathered on my own, when Internal Affairs does their investigation and they find that an officer has done something wrong and is about to get disciplined, suddenly there's a lawsuit. So I feel that one works with the other somehow. If you can explain, if you can't, I understand, again, because of the privacy, but I just can't help but feel that these lawsuits is a result, or kind of a way to undermine the disciplinary actions of an officer who's being held accountable, sort of.
Sure. So I'm sure Natalie will begin to twitch as I answer this question, because I think generally speaking, when we are sued, the answer that that Corporation Counsel gives us is, look, it's pending litigation. You really shouldn't say anything, or sometimes they say don't say anything. But I think that your question is general enough where I'm comfortable answering it for a couple of reasons. One, I'm pretty tired of being sued myself, and I think Assistant Chief Medina is as well. And two, I think you're spot on. Most of the lawsuits that we see do have people that.
I'm sorry, Chief.
Chief, I'm sorry, and through you, Mr. Chair, is Natalie on our screen?
I don't see her. She was.
She was here before, and now I don't see her.
Right, I think we lost her. I had trouble myself with the WebEx.
She can't yell at me then if she's not here.
I was about to say that.
Listen, I will just say this. So there's a balance here, right? Because you want your employees to be able to feel that they can file a lawsuit or a complaint or an EEO complaint or a CHRO complaint or anything if they are wronged. So I in no way say this to discourage that, because that process is important. I'm not perfect, and a lot of times things that occur at the rank of sergeant and lieutenant, where a lot of these lawsuits stem from, we don't know about them as upper management, as assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs. And then when you find out about them, it's because you're named in a lawsuit. And a lot of times That's just how lawsuits work. They sue the chief because I am in charge of the agency, and then they usually sue kind of everybody between me and them, and then see kind of where the breakdown happens in the world of lawsuits. That it seems like the higher that the culpability lands, the bigger the payout. But I've noticed the same thing. I think a lot of the folks that are engaged in lawsuits, currently have been also subject to discipline. I think that goes back to the previous union administration that really that was the answer that he gave a lot of people was, if you don't get your way, sue. I will not comment on what I think of those lawsuits because I really can't. I think everyone should have their day in court. Everybody should have their due process, and if they were aggrieved, that will be found. What I will say is a lot of them are coming out. They take a long time to go through the process, but a lot of them are coming out. We just recently had a CHRO complaint that came back not substantiated. We've had some of these things withdrawn. There have not been a lot of successful suits that I've seen recently, especially. But that being said, they have to be able to go through the process. But I think we're in a culture nowadays in 2020 where people are a little bit, sue happy, and if they don't get their way, and if they feel like they're being, disciplined, that they resort to a lawsuit or some kind of a complaint. I would leave you to just read them. They are usually public. Usually they're on the website, and judge for yourself based on what they say. And I think you've probably done that, which is probably what sparked the question, exactly what's contained in there. But it's frustrating for us, but at the same time, you want to make sure people have a feeling that they have the right to do process. And, not everything that myself or Chief Medina says goes. We should be able to be questioned, if somebody thinks they have a legitimate right, if we're not following the contract, if we're not following the code of conduct or whatever it might be. But certainly the trend recently, most of the people involved in the suits against us are also involved in the IA and or disciplinary process here at HPD.
Okay, and then I'll be finished. I'll give everyone an opportunity here. My other question, which I found bothersome also. So when this Deadpool, was exposed, right? I would think that the protocol would be for whoever sent it to the blog, this worthless blog. Okay, I would think that they would at least bring it to your attention and follow the I would think there's some kind of protocol in place, right? Where if there's something egregious as this, they will bring it to your attention so that you can address it, not bring it to some blog and then no one knows what's going on.
Yeah, so there is several protocols in place here to do that. There is the union. So if someone saw that text message, and hopefully everyone that saw that text message was offended by it, they would be able to go to the union and say, this isn't right. Address this with, and if they didn't want to be, considered turning in a fellow employee, they could go the union route, and they could turn them in through the union, where the person that is making the complaint would not necessarily have to be named. They could go that route. There is a chain of command here. They could let a supervisor know. We literally have a suggestion box. They could put it in the suggestion box. They could go through the EAP system and say, listen, I read this and I was disturbed and it bothered me. The EAP system is confidential, and the EAP system could then come to us and bring. So there is a lot of ways that something like that can be brought to the attention of the administration. And in the meetings that I've had with lieutenants and sergeant, I've challenged them this. I said, when can you say you brought something to my attention, or Assistant Chief Medina's attention, or for that matter, our command staff's attention, that we didn't address? Not everybody on this call agrees with how I address it or the decision that I come to at the end, but I have addressed every issue that has come in front of me, whether it comes from the public or whether it comes from this department. So if an employee was so bothered by that text, which I 100% agree that every employee here should have been bothered by that text, why would you leak it outside and not address it internally where we can fix it? This department is, I think a lot of people in this department, and if you look at the cultural analysis, there's a shift. And you think if you come in and you discipline hard, like I have, and like Chief Rosado did, you would think that your employees would resent that. But quite the opposite occurs here. People are tired of favoritism, and people are tired of people not being held accountable. And quite frankly, in that cultural analysis study, they said, discipline is becoming more fair. And as an agency, people are embracing it. I think that tells us that the majority of our cops want the right thing done. They don't want to be embarrassed by a blog or by a newspaper or by anything. They want to take ownership of this department and change this department for the better. The only way you can do that is to bring those issues up here for us to deal with. And the first time that I sweep something under the rug or don't address it, then I will invite them. In fact, I will make the introduction to them to go to the Hartford Courant or the blog or anywhere they want to go and expose the fact that we swept something under the rug. The fact is, I haven't done that. And I won't do that. Like I said, not everyone is going to agree with the way that I deal with things, but I look at the whole. I have emotion. Those of you that have talked to me, and even a little bit now, know that I can be emotional. But when I make a decision in this chair, it has to be the decision as the chief of police. I have to look at all the facts, all the circumstances. Many have said, well, you brought this up. You made an excuse for somebody. No, that's a fact. We actually did an investigation and we came up with the facts. And those are mitigating in a lot of cases. There are two sides to every story, sometimes five sides to every story. And it is my responsibility to look at all of that, before I make a decision and before I take action as the chief. Otherwise, I might be the most popular chief in the community because I'm looked at as a hard-nosed guy that goes outside of the rules and drops the hammer. But if I lose the cops, that doesn't do our community any good either. The police department is not just. It's not important that our police department gets along with the community and has trust with the community. Our police department is a member. They are part of our community here. And I think they take that very seriously. So, I think that was a long way of answering your question, but I hope I answered your question.
No, that's all right. So, I just want to also ask you on that same note, is there any kind of regulation that that's in place for, again, of course, with this betting pool, where an officer should not be doing anything negative on social media, what have you? Is there anything in place?
Yep. We have a social media policy. I think it's one of the ones on our forward-facing policies. You can see it on the website, but I can gladly email it to everybody in council.
Yes, please.
That's very specific. We've got a policy about unauthorized contact with the media. So the folks that would want to release things outside, listen, if your intent is to fix something, then there are processes in place to do that. When you leak something out prematurely like that without notifying, the people that are entrusted with overseeing this department, that's just evil intent. That's smearing people's names and things like that, and that's just there's no place for that here. So there's policies about that as well. I can put those together for you, and I can send them.
Okay, and then this is my last one. I know, Councilman Mictum, I'm sure you have plenty of questions too. Real quick, with the new year coming, to a start, couple of weeks, I told Councilman Mictum last night that this is a turning point. And I do believe this is a turning point because the nonsense is stopping now, right? And I know and I understand it's not an overnight change, but definitely I feel it is a turning point. And I hope I'm not wrong, Chief. So with that said, how are you and the HPD going to move forward from this?
So I think, the new year, I think we're all happy to turn the calendar on 2020. I hope that it's the number that was the jinx, and it doesn't continue into 2021. But listen, the department and others have faced a lot of challenges in 2020. I'm looking forward to being able to turn a new page, but this is something that did occur, and we have to address it and own it as a department. Even if it was one person that sent the text, it still reflects poorly on every one of us. So I think moving forward, if you asked me a month ago what my primary goal in 2021 would have been, I would have probably talked about public safety. I would have probably talked about violence reduction, and I'll still talk about those things. But I think it goes hand in hand now with public trust as well. I think we really have to get back in touch with the community through our not just our CSOs, not just our walk beats, but ourselves, Chief Medina, myself, officers that don't normally do that. I'd like to, begin those community conversations that we started a few years ago that seemed to go very well. I think dialogue is what really pushes trust. And, in an environment where we can't get in front of people, physically get in front of people and talk to them, it makes it very difficult to keep that trust. And then you have an incident like this that happens that shatters that. So I think, moving forward, again, the stage is set here to continue that accountability. Now, can I promise you that misconduct will not occur going forward? I can't. I mean, but what I can promise you is we will continue to take that on in a very public and transparent way, and continue to steer this ship in the HPD, the culture of this PD, in the right direction. I think we have the support of a lot of police officers here. I would say, I dare say almost everyone to do that. Folks on this call have talked to our officers. They've had to call our officers, and I think most recognize that. Moving forward, it's got to be about communication, about an understanding that that's not what we stand for, and that we can do better as a group. Knowing that our supervisors are going to really take their jobs very seriously, and knowing that there's going to be ramifications if they don't. I was very blunt with my supervisors when I said that. I said, you will be subject to stricter, stiffer penalties for not doing the supervision job. And we will continue down those roads, to try to keep our officers accountable to what I believe they know is the right thing.
Okay. Councilman Mictum.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez. I wanted to ask a couple questions first, Chief and Assistant Chief, either of you, about some of those numbers, the discipline and sustained complaint numbers. The advocate numbers, those refer to a time that someone got a discipline?
Yeah, so what happens is any time that a supervisor is going to discipline an employee, and it could be an officer was late to roll call, or it could be this. It could be something as serious as this.
So that discipline could be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What you do is you pull an advocate number so that we can track the fact that discipline has been initiated. So that discipline could be stemming from a citizen complaint. It could be stemming from an I-file from the chief's office. It could be stemming just from a supervisor that says, hey, you're late to roll call. I'm writing you up for being late to roll call. So it's any violation of the code of conduct, any violation generates an advocate number.
And that discipline could be anything from, like you say, a write-up to dismissal. It's the whole scope.
Whole gamut. Yep.
So that increase, you showed us an increase in sustained complaints, which I presume means an increase in disciplines. But what is the increase in loss of pay or rank over time? Because that's what matters.
I don't know if I understand that. What is the increase in loss of pay or rank?
Let me put it this way. You could tell me that discipline has gone up by 50%, or there's been 24% more disciplines. But if the vast majority of those disciplines were write-up without suspension, then no one lost pay. They just got a talking to. So what I want to know is how much of that increase in discipline is discipline that hurts?
So I've never delved into that specifically. What our code of conduct, Our code of conduct prescribes what the penalty would be, except in the case of unclassified, which is this particular charge of conduct unbecoming. But all the other ones, and I've shared the code of conduct, I think, with you and others before, and we are in the process of, we have a committee that's in the process of revamping the code of conduct as well, because I think it's an archaic document from like 1992 or 1993. There's a lot of stuff in there that's not specifically addressed. It doesn't really mention social media in there because there was really no social media in 1992. So a lot of the prescribed discipline that I can implement is prescribed in that code of conduct. So, but I can certainly look at it. But when we go from 3.3% sustained complaints to 27 or 24 or 30, I'll guarantee you there's an increase in suspension as well. But I certainly can, that's not hard to pull.
Okay, a different question. You know, we've seen news reports about the Deadpool text that I think 16 officers in major crimes were implicated, which I assume means they received it. And then folks outside of the department at the state's attorney's office received it. Do we know the total number of people who received that text?
You know, I thought I did, you know, when I said 19, but today I was given an update and there's 20. So 16 Hartford Police Department employees and 4 employees of the court is the number today. That's why, I try to be, as informative as possible, but, as there's an investigation underway. Again, we don't know if anybody forwarded that thing either. So that will all be completed and included in the final investigation. But as of right now, my knowledge that I have as of today is 20 total recipients, 16 HPD, 4 from the state's attorney's office and the court.
And are we going to end up knowing who all those people were, like not where they work, but their names?
Yes. Yeah, no, you'll know where they work too. I mean, it's going to, everything will be included in that investigation. And then, like I said, I've already had conversations with the state's attorney, and she's going to take it from us and deal with, her side of it as well.
And what's the discipline that would go? Because, I mean, you said it seems to you that the right way, if people had faith in the system, would be for them to report it. And that did not happen. If, somebody leaked it and nobody else reported it. So is there discipline in the works for the folks who got it and didn't report it?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the investigation. I mean, the question has to be asked of them, did you do anything about it? As far as I sit here in front of you now, I was not made aware of it. If official action was taken, I would think that I would have been made aware of it. I would think that Assistant Chief Medina would have been made aware of it. He was not, and I was not. So as I sit right now, my assumption is that there is going to be more discipline. But somebody has to ask the question of the individuals on that text message. Did you do anything? Did you report it to EAP? Did you report it to your union? Where was the breakdown? That's why I couldn't take immediate disciplinary action against everybody that received the text. 4 of the people don't fall under me, so I won't deal with them. The 16 that do fall under me, the question had to be asked. We do know that, and again, I'm not going to say how many, but we do know that the vast majority received it on personal cell phone. So, I don't know what they did with it. Did they forward it? Did they, so that all has to be found out, because that could be compounding discipline. If you got it and you didn't do anything about it and then you forwarded it, that's another issue. So I really can't talk about I can't guess, what else will happen until I read the investigation. And then I have to say, okay, I think this is a complete investigation. This is what we do with every investigation. It goes through the chain of command. In this particular case, it's going to go directly to a deputy chief that will review it. Assistant chief will review it. I will review it. And then all 3 of us have the ability in the command review process to send it back if we have more questions and say, wait a minute, we didn't think that these questions were properly answered, or we have further questions, or whatever it might be. That's the process that these investigations go through, all of them.
But if that many people got it and nobody, at least as far as you know now, I know you're not done with the investigation, but what it looks like now is that many people got it and nobody brought it forward. And as far as we can suppose, everybody thought it was okay. That would suggest 16 of 26 in major crimes. That's a cultural problem, right? This is not a one-off. You would agree?
I wouldn't, because what I would expect if this is a cultural problem is I would have expected to see responses. If this is something that people thought was no big deal, cops aren't by nature silent or quiet. And what I would have, the one thing I see that I find encouraging, and again, until the final investigation is done, I won't know if that's the case or not. But we're talking about things moving electronically. They're traceable. I don't know that if somebody wants to lie about it, it'll probably be, it'll certainly be brought to the surface. That'll be a whole other issue. But I would have thought if this was something that was commonplace, if this was something that was culturally accepted, and if it was something that they did yearly or something like that, which is another question I had, that we would see a response, like selecting a location or saying, "Hey, I'm in," or something like that. We saw nothing. I think most of the people, honestly, likely weren't sure what to do with it, and the fact that it wasn't, responded to. Again, we don't know though if it was responded to by individual text messages or something like that. But on its face, if this was really something that was deemed acceptable by the majority of the major crimes and the people on that text message, I would have expected responses. I don't know that I've ever seen a text message group with 20 people in it where no one responded, really, except one person said TY, which is thank you. And obviously the question that has to be asked to that is, what did you mean by that? Was it just a response to give a response? But that's the only response out of 20 people. Do I wish that all 20 people went to their supervisors and said, this is messed up and we need to do something about it right away? I do. And I want to know why that didn't happen. But I don't, what you said is possible. But I look at it also the other way where, it's kind of odd that no one engaged in 2 days. They had 2 days to engage really before we knew about it. So we'll see. We'll see what the investigation reveals.
Just another question, because you brought up, as you were talking about culture and the question of how the tone is set, that you had been criticized for making excuses for officers when there's discipline or some incident arises. And you said, well, every story has at least two sides. I want to ask you, I want to delve into that a little bit, because if we go back to the incident where the officers went to West Hartford and talked to the teenagers who were raising money for their football team, which I think technically that incident happened before you were chief, but then the investigation happened under your watch. And when that discipline was issued, you said publicly, because it was in the newspaper, well, when we looked into it, we found out that someone else had knocked on that officer's door a month before and startled his wife, right? Like you said that publicly, as though that excused the behavior. And then when
I would say this, that's not an excuse for behavior. When I'm asked questions, I've spent over 2 hours at a time answering questions by counsel and others. And when I'm asked questions about specifics in the case, I give answers. The final report for that incident was significantly large, and I released it to everybody to see. And the fact remains that there are things that occurred there that the employees said, look, like this isn't the first time, that there was other. So that's not to excuse anything, but that is to say, listen, you live in the world of court, as prosecutors, as people that try cases, the prosecutors have to divulge all the information, including exculpatory information. They have to give you everything. And that's exactly what I expect from these investigations is everything. Do I take into consideration everything? Absolutely. That is my job. That is the call. That is exactly what will happen at the labor board. It's one thing to be compassionate, and believe me, I am in this case and others, but you have to be competent as well. And when I go in front of the labor board and have to defend these disciplinary actions, I have to be able to say that this is all I knew. I can't just leave information out and not answer it. So that was not something that I made up as an excuse. It was a fact of the case that was brought out that I talked about. So I don't do that to defend. I do that because I think everyone's entitled to all the information, and that's a reason that we don't, when we have more information that we need to gather, we don't rush to judgment. We take all the facts into consideration, and that's exactly what I did in that case.
Well, let me push back a little bit, because what the other part of that, of course, is that you are sending a message to the public and to the other officers about how seriously you take conduct, whatever the discipline is. And now if we go to the case in May of Officer Herman, who shoved a bystander who was filming and who was found to have violated police policies and, by the way, got no discipline other than a talking to. In that case, in your comments to the media, one of the things you said was that it wasn't clear that Officer Herman should have known to report a shove of a civilian in his report. And let's remember, he didn't just not report it. He said he didn't touch him. So he lied in a report. He got no discipline for it. And one of your public pronouncements, not to counsel, not in a report, but in an interview with the media was, and I'm sorry, I don't remember offhand if it was either Fox or The Current, I don't remember which, but you said it wasn't clear that he should have known to, in essence, not lie on his report about committing an assault on a civilian. And I'm bringing this up not for you to defend the individual instance, but to make a point to you, which is that the things you say publicly, they send a message not just to us counsel, but to civilians and to officers.
I got to say, the things you say publicly also send a message to Councilman.
Wait your turn. That sends a message.
I relinquish my time to you.
I'm not finished is what I'm saying. I appreciate that you gave your time, but let me finish what I'm saying and then I will shut up, I promise. When you make those excuses, I understand they're factual, but when that's the thing that you say in talking about discipline, you send a message to the force, right? That creates culture. That says, well, this came out publicly because that's how these disciplines happen, is they get reported or someone on council makes a fuss and then the discipline happens. And so we have to hand out a discipline, although in fact, Officer Herman got none. But let me make sure to tell you, force, that I see your side of the thing. And I want to suggest to you that makes culture. When that is your record, when something comes up and every time you make sure to say, well, it wasn't so bad because someone unrelated to the black teenagers who were affected did something unrelated to this incident, or because Officer Herman maybe didn't know that he wasn't supposed to lie in his report, that makes culture. And I would suggest to you that you should rethink how you approach those things in your public pronouncements if what you want to do is create a culture that puts respect for civilians above all other things. We're at the top of the list, near the top. I'm done, Chief Medina, go ahead.
Just before you go, I'll respond to that. So when you go out and you do press conferences, when you try to be as transparent as possible, listen, all of that information is in each one of those reports. I don't pretend to be able to memorize. In that particular instance, when you're out there and you're talking to the media, I sometimes talk to the media for 10 or 15 minutes and they show 5 seconds, sometimes 10 seconds. So you don't always get the entire conversation. That's why I encourage people to ask questions. In this particular case here, we did a full investigation inside of the police department into Officer Herman's conduct that day. The investigation came to my desk, and still in the command review process, we had conversations between myself, Assistant Chief Medina, use of force instructors within the department about whether the conduct of Officer Herman rose to the level of a reportable use of force or not. Now, in his report, he didn't mention touching the individual, and he claimed that he didn't remember doing that. That is not uncommon, and it is not unless, it is not a lie just because there's an inconsistency. We tell our officers all the time to write their reports based on their recollection. And then if there's a discrepancy, a lot of times officers look at these cameras later and they say, oh my God, I don't even remember doing that. You're in the heat of the moment. An officer had just been headbutted and assaulted. Officers don't often recall every detail. It's called tunnel vision. There's science behind it. I've deferred to that science from an outside perspective to make decisions. What's also important to note in this particular case that was, conveniently left out, is that I wasn't comfortable with. So I forwarded that case to one of the largest, most respectable civilian oversight entities in the country, the LAPD Inspector General's office, the one that we modeled our Inspector General model after. And I independently sent it to him and said, hey, take a look at this. The guy that's in charge, not the guy that does the use of force, boot on the ground that does the use of force investigation, the guy in charge of the use of force section of the LAPD Inspector General's office. And I had him review it. And he came back with a finding that contradicted the finding of my department. Not by a lot, but he said it was a reportable use of force. Now, if my use of force instructors say it's not, if my policy people say, well, it might be, but it's in the middle. If Assistant Chief Medina and I can't agree completely on the investigation, and I send that across the country to the West Coast, to one of the most reputable models of oversight, civilian oversight that there is, and they come back to me with a finding, I followed that finding to the letter. I didn't say, you know what, I'm going to go with the PD one. I asked for an oversight, I got it, and I followed it to the letter. We can't now dislike that and say there was wow, the officer was there was gross misconduct on the part of the officer. When an independent person that does this for a living for the better part of 20 years says different. He made recommendations, and I followed those recommendations. And the officer was in fact disciplined. The officer was disciplined, negligent failure to comply with policy and procedure. So you can't say nothing happened to him. Now, in the reportable use of force, basically
Did he lose pay?
What's that?
Did he lose pay?
You don't always lose pay in discipline. Sometimes the code of conduct for that violation could be an oral reprimand, it could be documented counseling, or it could be a suspension. I believe it was an oral reprimand or documented counseling in that particular case.
That's a culture problem.
What's that called? That's called progressive discipline.
Gentlemen, so Chief, you did mention that's being looked at because it's antiquated from 1992. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that will be straightened out. And I understand, Councilman Mictum, there's certain levels of discipline, and when you reach a certain level, then that level equals dollar signs. So I'm pretty sure that will be taken care of. Assistant Chief Medina, do you still have something to say? And if not, I will move on to Councilman Gale.
Councilman, I'm disheartened. I sit here and I listen, and I'm disheartened.
Disheartened.
What I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I've seen in the last couple of days. I would like everyone to take themselves and put themselves on camera and raise their hand and say, how many of you have been doing an autopsy? Raise your hand if you've been doing an autopsy. The last one I went to was a trooper who was killed in the line of duty. Now it's my 200th one. Did you hear me correctly? My 200th one. You question the men and women of this agency. Put yourselves in their shoes. Understand what they've been through. Understand what they've seen. Chief Doty goes out. He defends them. He defends the city. And all I hear is attacks. I don't hear camaraderie. I hear nothing. I hear attacks. I hear self-agendas. You know what? I live with those memories every day. I see those bodies every day. And I'm tired. Because these men and women see these things. They live them. Step in their shoes. You want to attack them? Walk beside them. You want to help them? Walk behind them and support them. You want to defend them? Get out in front of them. But to divide a city, to divide a community with the hatred that's being spewed. I see people whose names aren't on the screen who I still don't see their faces right now. I can tell you, look at my background. I've seen them. And I just hear hate. Hate. I'm going to speak from the heart. And I came to the city of Hartford after 21 years in the state police to help them make this community better. I came here because I grew up in the city of Bridgeport. I've seen people stabbed in front of me. I've seen people robbed in front of me. I've seen the lack of communication between the police department and the community. And I come before you saying, this is wrong as counsel. What I see and what I hear. You know, Chief Doty, you don't like him, dislike him, he's honest. He tells you how it is. You hardly ever hear from me at all. At all, you hear from me. He's the public figure, I'm the internal figure. You know, so whatever you think or whatever you say, I'm bothered. If you have a question what we're doing, how we're relating with the community, hop in a cruiser. Please do. Go to a crime scene, stand over the body in its pure form, and that's when it's cleaned up at an autopsy. And tell me what you remember and what thoughts you take with you home at night. You're not going to hear from anyone else purer than this. From those detectives of major crime across the country. Not in Hartford, not in Bridgeport, not in New Haven, not in this city, and not in the state of Connecticut. Come walk alongside us. Because I did it for 12 years. And I'm sorry, Chief, I'm sorry. But I've had enough. You attack the very essence of the people who are protecting you without understanding them. You know what? I support the men and women of the Hartford Police Department and what they do. I've been there. I've done it. You know what? And the last thing you want to do is to walk into a home and knock on a door and say, hey, I'm sorry for your loss, and watch a family crumble to their knees. You do that. Because I have. And tell me how you feel, counsel. You want to attack us? Attack us. Walk alongside us first. You know what? It's a shame. And I'm disheartened. Because I've given my life to the state and now to this city. My family has given their life to this state and their city. And they have suffered because of it. The late night calls, me coming home, not talking about what happened. So, I don't know what you want. You know, but it's time to unify, not divide. There's too much divide in this world. There's too much divide in this community. And it starts here with counsel. You know, and I gotta stop, and I will stop. Chief, I'm sorry. You know, you can reprimand me tomorrow. Whatever. That's from the heart. It's time to heal the community, not divide the community. So please, let's unify.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Medina, and I really appreciate every word you said and shared with us. Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thanks, Councilman Sanchez. I didn't have any questions tonight of anybody. I appreciate you asking, but I'll defer. Finish the meeting. I must say this was a very dramatic moment, and certainly something to take to heart.
Okay, thank you. I thought you did raise your hand, but I appreciate your words at this moment. And I'm going to call on Council President Rosado.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Assistant Chief Medina, thank you for sharing that with us. I don't know why you apologize, because God knows you don't have to apologize. And like I said last night, I support Chief Thody. I support you. I ask this council body to please unite and see if we can work together to move the city forward. And you're absolutely right. I, growing up, have seen a lot of bodies, and it is traumatic. And that's one of the reasons last night why I talked about feelings and getting the help that these police officers need. Sometimes it's very difficult to talk about it, and you decide to disassociate yourself from your emotions, and you get to a tipping point where you can't take it anymore, and you take it out on things that you would think you would never take it off on. But I want to thank you for sharing that, and I do agree with you 100%. Chief Thody, thank you for your report, and know that I am going to speak for myself, Council President. You have my total support, and so does Chief Medina. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Council, well, let me let Councilwoman Rossetti speak. You're on mute.
No, I'm not. I'm thinking.
Okay.
Just as, and I'm a huge person for, chain of command, and I can't imagine being a police officer. That's why I'm not a police officer. Certainly, I've had to call police officers in my life. But I want to say, as an elected official in a city that I love, I also have seen and experienced things that others have not. And what I live with is when I wanted to speak my truth, and yes, I was one of the council people that asked for this officer to be terminated because I thought long and hard about it. It actually ran through my mind that I was afraid to do that. Why should that be? So, Assistant Medina, I certainly have a relationship with you. Chief Thody, we've talked, but know our truths also. Know that I have a police department that at times I am afraid of. And look what I look like. So I am ready to start healing, but that does not mean I don't get to speak my truth either. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yes, I don't think that was the purpose is that we do not speak our truth. I believe the whole purpose is that we should start working together and moving forward rather than holding the reins back. Councilman Minkdom, let's make this one a short one, please.
You bet. I do want to respond to Assistant Chief Medina, and I agree he doesn't have anything to apologize for. He spoke from the heart, and I appreciate that. But I'm going to say, he's asking me to walk beside and walk behind the 400-ish, I can't remember the number right now, the number of officers we have in the city. And what I'm asking him and the chief and every officer to do is to put themselves in the shoes of the 125,000 people of the city who do live in the city, unlike the vast majority of the officers, because they are also traumatized. And yes, I have never seen bodies from the perspective of an officer, but I have seen them from the perspective of a civilian. And I have seen civilians brutalized, and I have talked to civilians brutalized by officers, and if not brutalized by officers, living in fear of officers, feeling like they can't call the police when they have a need for calling the police because of that. That's real. That is the experience of many of our constituents. I don't know if you listened to public comment last night, but O'Neill Anderson, right? He's a vice president of the DPW union. He's a pillar of his community. He's a father of little kids. And he talked about being disrespected by police on a routine matter. I mean, that is the reality. And so if we're talking about who's going to walk in whose shoes, I want the folks whose job it is, who don't even live here mostly. I want the priority for them to walk in our shoes, not the other way around. And I don't mean to seem insensitive, and I don't mean to say that the job isn't difficult and stressful, but I am a lot less concerned with standing behind and next to the officers than them standing behind and next to us. And I don't mean us council, I mean us residents.
Let me ask you this question, Councilman. Do you know what the Phoenix Project is?
I'm sorry, the what?
Do you know what the Phoenix Project is?
I do not.
Back in the 80s, in the city of Bridgeport, where I grew up, it's called the Phoenix Project, where they put barriers around a community and secluded them one way in and one way out.
You're talking about
That's what I grew up during, Councilman.
Are you talking
So
about
what you're asking for?
No, I'm asking
I
if you're talking
walk
about
beside the people in the community. I lived that. I went from the bus stop to bus stop. I ran into the officers. And I said to myself, I will not treat that community how I was treated. So that's the world I grew up in. I grew up in the projects, Councilman. So research the Phoenix Project. See how they did it on the east side of Bridgeport in the height of the Latin King War with the Salitos. And then tell me. Because that's what I'm saying for you to walk side with me. Me and you, Councilman Mitchell, should walk side by side in the city. Because that's what I grew up in. Research the Phoenix Project. Google it. Right. Barriers. The state police was in there trying to take down the Latin Kings. Seeing people stabbed. So I know what you're saying, Councilman. And that's why I treat people with respect and dignity, regardless of how down they're out and how high they are. That's how I treat people. So I say, walk beside me in that world.
I would definitely look that up myself as well, Chief, Assistant Chief Medina. So it is 7:43, 2 minutes to quarter of. I believe that we will end this meeting. I think it was a very productive meeting, a very informative meeting, emotional as well. And it was a great meeting. So.
Yes, it was, Councilman. Through you, Chair.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, y'all.